I can't hit my protein. Yeah. So this is the first edition of the educational series that I'm going to be doing on a bi-weekly process. And I thought a great way or great topic to start on is essentially how to hit your protein in the most effective and efficient manner. Now, if you don't know who this guy on the left is, he is a YouTube sensation, let's say. Short videos, very, very funny. But basically, he does these videos where, you know, he's essentially doing the most outrageous protein challenges, such as eating like 100 eggs or, 5 kilograms of yogurt and things like that until he hits a certain amount of protein. So, just to give you a bit of background there. But what we're going to be going into today is essentially the importance of protein. Okay, high protein sources, both vegan and vegetarian sources of protein, lean versus fat protein sources and where they might be most applicable, how I personally hit my protein and tips around that, and then also travel tips because, like myself, I know a lot of you do travel frequently for work, or you might travel for short term, long term. So it's good to know how to essentially keep on top of your protein, wherever you are in the world. So the importance of protein, as we may or may not know, it is the most important macronutrient of the three by far. Okay, it is the building blocks of your muscle mass, and you could be training as hard and as intense in the gym as you want, but if you're not getting sufficient amount of good quality protein, you're just not going to recover and not going to grow any strength, any muscle, and therefore your time in the gym is pretty damn wasted, which is the last thing that we want. So, of course, you need to be hitting protein. Now, how much do you need to hit? Well, a good measure, a good rule of thumb is anywhere between zero point 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of target body fat or body weight, sorry. And that is if you are in a fat loss stage. It's a little bit less when you're in a bulk, but instead of confusing things, let's just kind of aim for that to be super, super consistent and you won't go too far wrong. Of course, some of you guys may be a little bit heavier, and that's why we go for target body weight, because that would mean some of you might have to try and hit 250 grams plus of protein, which is going to be incredibly hard. Not only that, but your digestive system may suffer, and so may those around you. So, also, in terms of food and in terms of how it helps with diet, is one of the most, or is the most satiating of foods, especially coming from whole foods. And when you look at this delicious, rare piece of steak, that is probably the most satiating of foods. Like if you've ever tried to eat anything more than maybe a 32-ounce steak, which is fucking huge in itself anyway, I can guarantee you're gonna get super, super full. If you've ever heard of the phrase meat sweats, that is simply because you are so full. Not to mention the actual act of eating protein causes thermogenesis within the body, which means you essentially heat up within inside you. I mean, all food causes this, but protein has a typical way of doing this more effectively than other foods. So that actually means you're burning calories whilst you're eating protein as well. It's very rich in micronutrients. So, vitamins and minerals and all the essential things that we need to, live a healthy lifestyle. Most of it you can get from a good quality source of meat, particularly red meat. And that's why, the carnivore diet is something that you can live on, not something that I would suggest, but you can get most of your micronutrients from animal protein. It helps with recovery as well and muscular adaptability. Now, adaptability. Wow, that's easier said than done. But with that in mind, I am an advocate for this because I simply notice when I've not had enough protein, I don't recover as well. I'm aching, I'm sore, energy's down. So anecdotally, I know this has a huge, huge effect in that area. So high protein sources, if you don't know already, I would always be again an advocate for going for or focusing on whole food sources 80% of the time, and then you can supplement with 20% of the supplements such as whey protein, bars, yogurts, and puddings. But if you eat meat and if you eat fish, then that's what I want you to focus on. Red meat such as steak, beef, deer. If you want to get a little bit more exotic, you can play around with things like, kangaroo, if you're over in that part of the world. But yeah, red meat is one. Poultry, so turkey and chicken, other birds as well. Fish. So you've got your, whitefish, your cod, you've got mackerel, salmon, swordfish, prawns. You got loads of different types of seafood. Eggs, really, really good source of protein. You got your yogurts and dairy, so skyr and Greek. And just to add to that on dairy, you've obviously got your milk and cheeses as well, which I'll get onto in just a second. Vegan and veggie sauces for those of you out there who follow this type of diet, you still got plenty of options. Don't use this as an excuse to skip on your protein intake. Now, I must highlight, it's if you do this for morality reasons, then I completely get it. I'm not trying to change you and change the way you think, but if you're doing this for dietary purposes only, then I have to be honest with you, protein sources coming from animals are more effective and more nutritious than vegan and vegetarian sources. So just bear that in mind. But if you are vegan or vegetarian, these are what you can implement into your diet. Beans and legumes, tofu, seitan, tempeh, nuts and seeds. You've obviously got your plant-based meat as well, vegan protein powder and supplements. And then if you're a vegetarian, you can also add things like eggs to that, dairy, so your cheeses, your yogurts, and your milk as well. So there are, a variety of sources of protein, and I'm going to make this really simple by splitting this into, low, medium, and high fat sources of protein. So typically when you're in a fat loss stage, you want to be focusing more on the medium to low sources of protein because if I'm going to look at one extreme to the other, and you've got chicken breast on one side, pork belly on the other, 100 grams could maybe be around 200 calorie difference. Okay, not to mention that the lean protein source is usually higher in protein because obviously there's less fat grams in there as well. So in terms of low sources or low fat sources, you're looking at things like chicken breast, tuna steak, which I have been absolutely loving out here in the Philippines. It is delicious. Lean turkey mince, white fish, shrimp, turkey breast, and then just to move my head out of the way, you've got your low fat dairy options as well. So skimmed to semi-skimmed milk, nut milk, low fat yogurts, skyr yogurts, etc. You can also get things like low-fat cottage cheese or fat-free cottage cheese. Quark is another good one, and you can utilize those sources of sort of cream cheeses if you like to have things or like to get busy in the kitchen making creamy sauces. That is a great substitute, something I've used. Not to mention if I'm making things like Indian dishes, low-fat Greek yogurt. So again, I won't go into too much detail because we're focusing on protein alone. But if you want to kind of message me or speak to me directly about what you can do with those as a substitution, more than happy to give my advice there. Your medium size or medium fat sources are things like chicken thighs and turkey thighs, wild Alaskan salmon, lean beef mince, and rump slash fillet steak. And then your higher fat content. So, this is where I would recommend anyone who is trying to essentially build muscle and put on weight. These are great sources of protein to help with that because I know how it can be difficult increasing the amount of calories or increasing the food volume that you're trying to eat. So what we want to try and do is be smart and increase the amount of calories we are eating within a similar amount of volume. So you've got things like your ribeye and sirloin steaks, your lamb mince and lamb meat in general is pretty fatty. Pork belly, as I've mentioned, and anything like a pork steak, pork shoulder joint has a high fat content. Farmed salmon, tinned mackerel and fish, sardines, mackerel. Tuna's not in that bracket. Tuna is, in terms of tin tuna, is in on the lean side. And then you got your full fat dairy options, whole milk, full fat yogurts, full fat Greek yogurts. Cheese in general is pretty high fat content. And then eggs are high in fat. And just remember, please don't demonize fat. Fat is an essential nutrient, and it's good to have. To live a healthy life, you need a good source of fat coming in continuously within your diet. And if you don't, then you're going to notice things like a loss of color in your skin, brittle nails, your hair might start getting thin and falling out. These are things that we want to avoid. Okay, so moving on to the next one, my personal tips. just making sure I haven't missed anything. So this is what I actually do to make sure I hit my protein on a consistent basis. Yes, okay, some days you're not going to. Okay, some days you're going to be less, some days you're going to be more. But if you can be consistent, and as I say, the 80/20 rule plays a huge, huge part in pretty much every advocate of life, but especially within diet and training. This is what I do to follow that wherever I am in the world. Okay, so make protein the focus of every meal. What I mean by that is when you're selecting what you want for breakfast, lunch, dinner, always think, okay, what's the source of protein? Okay, if I'm going to have a pasta dish, if I'm going to have a stir fry, if I'm going to have even a pizza, I'm always thinking, right, what is the protein that I'm going to have? And then I build around it, make it the centerpiece and make it the most abundant along with vegetables within that meal. As a rule of thumb, and this can obviously vary between different sources of protein, but when I'm talking about meat, poultry, and fish, roughly 100 grams is around, 20, 100 grams is roughly around 20 grams of protein. So if you want to start tracking mentally and just being aware, that's a rule of thumb to follow. I have at least one protein shake a day. Okay, because essentially it is a convenient way of increasing my protein intake as a lot of us are, we're busy. We can't spend, a load of time in the kitchen. Straight away, you're getting 20 to 25 grams of, good quality protein as long as the protein brand and powder is of good quality. And then, that's a big chunk taken away for the day. Protein is always the first thought when you're hungry as well. So again, if you want seconds at dinner, I'll use Christmas dinner as an example. Instead of going for more roast potatoes, more Yorkshire puddings, go for the turkey first. At the carvery, go for more meat. Ask for more, if you're in a restaurant, ask to, increase the amount of protein that comes with a meal. Or look for extra. Like I say, when it comes to pasta dishes, can I add any, bacon or ham? Can I add any cheese? And I know it's a little bit higher in fat, but you're still getting protein in there rather than adding more carbohydrates through the pasta. Utilize supplements, as I mentioned, protein, whey protein, super, super convenient, but you've got other things as well that can also help take away your cravings. So you've got things like protein puddings, yogurts, and bars nowadays. And what I actually like to do, because things like Greek yogurt and skyr are already high in protein, I then use a scoop of my protein powder and mix that in, and that makes, a serving of that anywhere from 25 to 40 grams of protein, and it really satisfies the sweet cravings as well. Tracking focus. So, when we start a new journey like this, we get hung up on trying to be absolutely perfect in everything, trying to track all your macros, your calories, even micronutrients sometimes. Just focus on the protein, focus on the calories, and I can guarantee, even if you just focus on protein and getting good quality protein, you're going to get full before you can eat more than maybe 2 to 2,500 calories, depending on what your appetite's like, depending on the size of you. So if you just focused on protein and maybe hitting, 1 gram of body weight of coming from whole food, so your meats and poultry, I trust me, it's going to be a struggle to eat much more than that. But what you can do if you are low in the day and you've kept, a track of it and you have a little look come your dinner time, that that tells you you need to get a good high quality source of protein when it comes to your last meal of the day or last couple of meals of the day. And that sort of links to ordering extra protein, in that scenario. Sorry, there's a fly buzzing around me. Or protein treats, as I've just mentioned, I like to make my own because again, I'm using whole food sources, and it tends to be lower calories, less sugar, etc., etc. And finally, travel tips. So again, I know a lot of you travel for work or pleasure, like I'm doing. I'm doing a bit of both, and this is what I found to really, really help me, especially in the past few months whilst I have been outside of the home setting. So straight away, pack protein supplements, bars and powder. Now, if that's not possible, but you're going to be eating somewhere for maybe a significant amount of time, like I am, make it one of your first tasks. Go and find a supplement store or even a gym that you're at and buy yourself some protein. At the same time, seek out accessible protein sources. So typically, every gym nowadays has their own sort of pre-made protein shakes or can make a protein shake for you from their powder. But, using Thailand as the example, I found in every 7-Eleven store, they've got pre-made protein bottles from 28 to 33 grams of protein. So again, taking a big chunk away of my target through being able to find that. Find reliable and familiar restaurants or takeouts that you know you can get good quality sources of protein from and in high amounts. So again, using my experience here here and in Thailand, you've got places grills that are doing full rotisserie chickens. You've got barbecues where again meat's the focus, and if you get familiar and know where to go for your food, it just makes things so much easier because okay, I'm just going to go and pick up, rotisserie chicken. That's going to do me good for about 3 meals, and at least I'm covered for those. And they tend to be pretty cheap as well. What I also do is a small grocery shop prioritizing protein sources. Don't pick up the Cheetos. Don't pick up the fucking cookies. Go there, get your deli meats, your dairy shakes, your shakes, your bars, and your eggs, and just focus on that. Not saying you can't have any treats, but you're not going for the Cheetos. You're not going for the Oreos. Go and get what you need to get. When you're out for food and meals, because that's a part of being on holiday or traveling, base your meal decisions on protein content. So there's been so many times where I've looked at a menu and I fancy a bit of pasta and I'm like, it's going to have fuck all protein in it. You can tell as well by the price. If the price seems to be pretty cheap compared to other meals, typically it's not got a lot of protein in. If you do really fancy that, and again, Thailand was a great advocate for this because a lot of their meals, it's very, very tasty, but they don't put a lot of protein in. I'll just ask for another portion, or I'll see what they've got on the appetizers or the extras. Typically, they would have omelette or fried eggs, and in the appetizers, typically they'd have a grilled meat of some sorts, usually pork or chicken, and I'd add that to my meal. Therefore, increase of 30 to 40 grams just from making those two easy decisions. But, rule of thumb, what you can do if you are going out for a meal, and this applies more so if you are on holiday, you're going out for a date or date night or with your friends, start with a main over instead of a dessert and a main and dessert every single time. Make that starter a protein, mainly protein one. So, most places you can get a starter of some sort of grilled meat. And your main, again, make it protein focused. So typically on the menu, look for the grill section and base it on that. Finally, you're not going to be 100% all the time. It's going to be more difficult when you're traveling. I know that. So don't just throw in the towel and think, fuck it, I can't hit my protein, so I'm just not even going to bother. Something is always better than nothing. Reduced amount is better than minimal. That's what I'll leave it at because, I've gone through a lot there, but hopefully these little tips, these little hacks are going to help you stay more consistent with your protein. Not only that, you're going to actually realize results, you're actually going to benefit from increasing your protein amount, and therefore the hard work in the gym is now going to be supplemented by a good solid diet based on good quality protein. Let's go.